All right, buddy. Peace. Welcome to the Sorry to Bother You show. Wherever, however you're listening, we're so grateful to have you with us. As you guys know, I'm your host, Cashapp. And over the weekend, I was hanging out with a good friend of mine, and we were discussing uh, relationships and this woman that he was seeing or have been seeing for the past couple of weeks. And he talked about how he couldn't help but notice he had started to lose focus and started to lose a bit of his drive towards his job and some of the goals that he was trying to accomplish at this stage of his life. And it got me pondering as to whether or not there was a correlation between the timing of him losing that drive and focus and the woman he was seeing. And while he was speaking, he was talking about how he feels like this woman is a good woman for him and how he thinks that, that she's good for him and that, they can have a substantial relationship together. However, he failed to notice the impact that was having on his career and on the other aspects of his life. And it got me thinking about this broader question of, as men in our 20s, early 20s, mid 20s, going into our early 30s, should we be in relationships? Should we be looking for relationships at this stage in our life? And there's going to be a bevy of opinions. There's going to be a bevy of anecdotal evidence to prove this and prove that. The goal is to give a more pragmatic, more rational, and realistic perspective on this topic. And something I've noticed on social media and specifically on YouTube is that there's these number of channels that are, either extremely liberal, super liberal, appealing to, the so-called woke perspective, and then you have the red pill and MGTOW and Ignore, and you've got these bevy of different stratospheres of perspectives that all can be extremists in a sense. Not all of them, but some of them tend to really lend into the extreme perspectives of their philosophies. And to me, that just doesn't seem realistic, and it seems disingenuous because it feels like they're trying to appeal to a certain agenda and certain demographic. And whenever you try to kowtow your message to, fit a narrative or to fit only when you fit your message to appeal to what only one message or to only one demographic will be interested in listening to, that dilutes your message. You have to speak the truth and speak truth directly to who your target audience is, but never placate, never be disingenuous in your message. So it got me thinking, as men, should we be looking for relationships throughout our 20s and our 30s? Should that be our priority? Should we be willing to get into relationships? And before I get into it, I need to preface by clarifying what actual relationship is. And when I say relationship, I mean that someone that you're taking seriously and someone that you intend on being with an extended period of time. Obviously, we have, quote unquote, casual dynamics, and that's different from a actual relationship, an actual committed relationship. And oftentimes we get that confused. between the two, and that speaks to the dating culture of Western society, but that's another topic for another day. Committed relationships, substantial, serious relationships, should men be looking for that? And the question we always have to ask ourselves is the why. Why would you be looking for a serious relationship as a man at this age? at age, in your early 20s, going to your mid 20s, mid to late 20s, into your early 30s. Age range 23 to 35. Why would you be looking for a serious relationship? And oftentimes what you notice is that men at this age that are seeking and looking for a serious relationship, there are two things: that one, they haven't truly figured out what their purpose is yet at this stage in their life, what things that something they're passionate about, or two, they're trying to fill a void within themselves. And when I say that, I don't want to get that misconstrued, because naturally we are social creatures. We are naturally creatures of that bend towards community and bend towards creating that common social dynamic. So when I say feeling something, trying to fill something, a void within yourselves, I mean that there's a part of insecurity within yourself that you aren't comfortable with, and you try to mask that and cope with that by seeking relationships. And we have to be careful of that as men, because that can just leads to destruction. It leads to unhealthy relationship dynamics, and it almost always ends in disaster. So those are two things I noticed with men at this age, early to mid 20s, 30s, that are seeking, like vehemently seeking out relationships. Those are the two causes. That, like I said, they are trying to fill a void within themselves, and two, they haven't truly figured out what their purpose is at this stage in their life, or something that they're passionate about. And what happens is that if that void within yourself is never filled, it's never truly filled, the more you cope, the more you mask, the more you start to get comfortable with not addressing the issue, and eventually forget the issue is there entirely. So we have to be comfortable with being by ourselves as men for an extended period of time, so we can discover things about ourselves, discover more about ourselves, discover how we like to operate, how we like to have a day-to-day routine, or things we're willing and not willing to tolerate. Because if we don't have a set of standards and regulations for ourselves, then there's no way we can have a set of standards and regulations or a precedent or a standard for when we start dating women. Because everything is backed by spiritual, backed by scripture, right? So there's a hierarchy. There's the Most High, there's the Son, it's the man, it's the woman, it's the children. If we're not committed to the Most High, and we have an established foundation, a standard for ourselves that's backed by scripture, then we can't expect the woman to follow suit. And so what happens is you start having men that don't have these standards, don't have these precepts and concepts. And you don't have to necessarily follow the scriptures. You just have to have some sort of standard for yourself that you follow and keep yourself accountable to. What happens is men don't have that. And so when we start getting to relationships, women subconsciously, they feel that energy on us. And when they realize that this man isn't following a certain standard and a certain accountability for themselves, they lose respect for that man. And once you lose respect for your partner, the relationship cannot be fruitful by any stretch of the imagination. So as a man, we have to give ourselves time to develop, and we have to separate ourselves from relationships, from society, quote unquote, for an extended period of time, so we can figure out what we want. We can figure out how we want to move about in this life. And also we can just garner and gather more information. Something that my dad has always taught me is that as a man, you don't really start to get understanding for how life works and how life operates until you're about 35 years old. That's when it starts. That's when you really start to get understanding, beginnings of understanding for how life kind of moves. And when you start getting to relationships at young ages, from 23 to 33, like I said, you don't have very much knowledge to teach the woman, to teach your partner, to teach your spouse. And what happens is that knowledge is in some ways an aphrodisiac. It is an aphrodisiac. And when you don't have anything to teach your woman, your partner, your spouse, then it can become monotonous. And from a holistic perspective, nothing's wrong with monotony. Monotony is actually healthy for a relationship. What happens is a lot of women today aren't comfortable with monotony. They're not comfortable with boredom. And so then they start to dabble in other things outside of the relationship. Or they seek that thrill outside of the relationship. And what happens is that in that instance right there, men will start to say, oh, I don't know why she left. I don't know why she cheated. Or I don't know what I did wrong in that relationship. What happened is that you weren't ready to be in a relationship because you didn't have anything to teach your partner, to teach your spouse. And two, if you understood the red flags, what red flags look like, you would have never got into the relationship with that partner because she revealed herself to you in the beginning. Oftentimes as men, we're so hell-bent on getting into relationships, we ignore a lot of red flags. We just solely focus on the infatuation. But people reveal themselves to you within your first 3 interactions. And relationships are no different. So a lot of times as men, we ignore a lot of red flags that are presented to us in the beginning of relationships because we're so infatuated with the physical appearance of the woman that we ignore a lot of red flags like that. We might ignore the fact that she told us that she cheated on her previous partner, or she might have told us that she was in a DV case with her prior partner. Things like that. We ignore a lot of those sort of red flags because we're so focused on the present. We're so infatuated with what's in front of us from the physical. But we had to live deeper. We had to look deeper as well. We had to look past the physical into the spiritual to look at those red flags and see what our partner, the woman, is actually presenting to us. And once we realize those red flags are there, we then make the decision, okay, is this something that I'm willing to tolerate? Is this something that I'm willing to accept? Is this something I'm willing to bring into my space? And if it's not, then you have to act accordingly. And if it is, then you have to start to question yourself, okay, why am I willing to accept this? And then you start to figure out about yourself. So now that we figure out why would someone be seeking relationships at this time? Now that we've tackled that, what happens now is we have to establish priority within our life, within our movement life, right? So from this age range, from 23 to about 33, like I said, there is a fallacy of needing to be perfect, needing to get it right at this point in time. I don't think that's the case. I think now is the time to truly make mistakes in terms of finding our purpose, finding what we're passionate about. Something I always say is that, as a so-called black man in America, society, I truly don't believe that corporate America is for us. I don't think corporate America is built for us. This is modern day Babylon. This is a nation where we're behind enemy lines, per se. So any structure that's built within America is not truly going to be built in the benefit of the black man, despite all the many different talents, the many different monetary value and success that we can bring. It's not built for us. So we have to understand that. And is the entrepreneurial lifestyle for everybody? No, it's not. But just as a whole, I don't believe corporate America is in the benefit of the black man. We have to find what we're passionate about, what truly brings us purpose. And people always ask me, okay, how do you find out what your purpose is? How do you figure out what your purpose is? And I always tell them 2 things. One, your purpose is going to change over time. Your purpose is not going to stay the same throughout your life. It's always broken into phases. That's how the Most High normally works. But one thing that the Most High always talks about is service. That's the biggest thing. One of the biggest things that comes from Scripture is service to others. So if you're ever unsure about what your purpose is at this point in your life, think about how you can serve others. And normally what happens is whatever your gift or your talent, using that to serve others. If you follow that sort of dynamic, that sort of concept, you will start to find your purpose and start to be in more accordance with what your purpose is. And obviously, if you're ever unsure about what your purpose is, pray, ask Most High for that guidance. And once we find our purpose, then we start to live a more fulfilling life, a more purposeful life. And once you start to live a life with purpose, you start to have a much higher standard for what you're willing and not willing to tolerate, and what you're willing to bring into your space and what you're not willing to bring into your space. And what you start to find is that whatever doesn't bring you closer to your purpose, or whatever doesn't feed you in a positive sense, you're just not willing to tolerate. And one of the most attractive things for us as men is something we can do is, once again, hold ourselves to a higher standard, and also be willing to cut off anything that doesn't feed us positively. And obviously that makes us better as men. That's the sole purpose for why we do things, because that brings us closer to the Most High. But also, that's a trait that women can feed off of. That resonates within them, and that's a sign of exclusivity. You know, as men, we're purpose driven. We focus. We have tunnel vision on what we want and what we're trying to chase. And if there's only a few things that we allow with us on that path, that's a pretty exclusive path. And women feed off of that, and they think to themselves, okay, what can I do to be a part of that? How can I uplift him? How can I be a part of his journey? And so it creates a sense of mystique and intrigue for the woman. And so that's why women are drawn to men that are goal driven, or that have values, that have focus, or that perhaps have already achieved that status, right? But since I'm focused on this age range, 23 to 33, that drive of having that focus, that's going to attract the woman. However, we have to understand that whenever we give time to something that's not on our path, it just takes us longer for us to get to that path, to get to our purpose. And that's the understanding we have to have as well. So are you willing to give that time, a portion of your time, to extracurriculars? That's on you to decide. But just know the more time you give to your extracurriculars, you're just prolonging that path it takes to get you to your purpose. And what happens is, as you start to garner more attention, you start to get more interest, more women that start to approach you because you have this tunnel vision, and they feel that intrigue, the mystique, the exclusivity. Because that attention is nothing new for you, now you start to become more intentional, and you start to become more coherent when it comes to the vetting process. Something else that happens is that when men aren't used to having women approach them and give them attention, it's easier for them to just give attention to any woman that comes their way. And once again, that's not a sign of exclusivity. That's it's more of a sign of whimsicality. Everyone can get this, but you have to be intentional. You have to be sincere with who you give your attention to, because not everyone deserves to have access to you. You know, that's something that we preach to, or that women are taught, but which is right in a sense. It's very true. But men should be taught that as well, that not everyone deserves access to you from a spiritual, physical, mental level. And men have to remember that. And so what happens is, as you start to get more attention from women, you get used to the attention, so it doesn't faze you. But now the vetting process becomes easier, because now you're used to it, and now you can see, okay, well, this isn't what this woman isn't someone that fits the standard for what I'm looking for. This woman does. It's easier to make that vetting process. And what happens is, and this is all happening over the course of time, of course. Over time, you start to understand that if this woman, this partner, is someone that is willing to, in a sense, understand that she'll never come before my passion, my purpose, then this is someone that I might need to consider taking seriously. And by that time, but this normally tends to happen by the time you're about, like I said, around 33, 34 years old. Then you start thinking, okay, is this someone who I'm willing to take seriously? But there's no rush. You can't rush that process. You can't rush to get to that stage. Listen, it takes years. It takes time to get to know the woman, to develop an understanding of the woman. But we rush that process because we want to get into relationships so bad because we don't want to be by ourselves, and we don't even know it, but that's creating codependency with our partner. Often that's not a healthy foundation. And having that focus and that vision for where we want our life to be and what we want to do, it will be difficult, and it's going to cause you to be by yourself for extended periods of time. But that's why you have your support system. That's why you have your family. That's why you have something called your quote unquote your wolf pack. Your close knit of 4 or 5 brothers, people you call your brothers, that keep you accountable and hold you to a standard, and who feed off you, who you feed information into, and they do the same reciprocal. And that's why you have your mentors. That's why you have 2 or 3 mentors that you that you confide in, that you seek information from. And these are just things that kind of help the process and development of young men, that help us. This is all things that kind of help us as we move about these early stages of this stage of our life. And are there some men that are blessed with the opportunity to find their partner, to find their spouse early in life? Absolutely. When I speak about this, I'm speaking this from a general sense. Yes, there are men that are blessed to find their wife early in life, and they build and grow together. But it's still it takes a vetting process. It takes time to try to see if this is someone that you're willing to spend the rest of your life with. If this woman fits the values for what you want in a partner. And that cannot be rushed by any stretch of the imagination. And once you have your priorities in check, once you understand that my priorities are the Most High, my relationship with Him, my purpose, my passion, my drive, what I'm attacking in life, in the physical realm, then my family, my support system, and then my spouse or my partner. Now I soon become married. That changes. Your spouse moves into your family, but that sort of dynamic, once you understand that's how the hierarchy should be, it makes the roadmap easier. It just makes it easier to move about in this life, and it keeps you accountable for where you're slotting things and making sure you're slotting things in the appropriate spot. But we have to be comfortable with who we are as men first before we start to get into relationships. Because if we don't understand ourselves, the woman will never understand us. And if the woman does not understand us, they won't understand the relationship. And if they do not understand the relationship will not last. Everything starts with you, black man. Everything starts with you. You hold yourself to a high standard, the relationship will be held to a high standard. And we have to remember these things before we get into relationships. Because you're no longer just providing for yourself from a physical standpoint, from a monetary standpoint. Sure, you're providing for your spouse now that you're in a relationship. But when you're in a relationship, you're no longer just providing for yourself spiritually as well. You have to feed into your partner, just like how you have to open up that faucet and gain knowledge from the Most High. You got to feed into your spouse as well. And if you have nothing to feed your spouse, you have nothing to give your spouse spiritually, that relationship would just have no substance at all. And I was when I speak on this, I'm speaking about serious relationships, but then also you have to understand that even when it comes to more casual relationships, that you have to be intentional about who you give that energy to as well, because even that can definitely cause you to stray off the path of of where your focus is. And once again, not all attention is good attention. We have to be very careful about who we give that energy to, who we give that space to, even if it's in the casual sense, because that energy can start to attach onto you, and it can cause you to stray off your path. So even when it comes to dating in the casual sense, still be intentional, be very intentional, be selective about who you give that time to, because exclusivity, it just siphons, it goes into all aspects of your life. You can't be exclusive in one aspect and not be exclusive in the other. Just like how you can't work hard in one aspect of your life and not work hard in the other. It all ties together. Something you see quite often is that people that are extremely dedicated and disciplined in one aspect, that's how their entire life is. Same way that with the exclusive concept of relationships. Listen, be intentional about who you're giving your time to. It doesn't matter who you give your time to. Be intentional about it. Have a standard, even if that means you have to write it out. Okay, who am I willing to give my time to, and why? Write that down, just so having a visual representation gives you that standard to look at and say, okay, this is it. Just writing it down, or just having that standard keeps you accountable, and it eliminates a lot of issues and a lot of problems that men face. One of those being obviously the children out of unplanned children out of wedlock. One of the biggest financial decision that a man can make is choosing the woman who he will marry and have his kids with. But so oftentimes, the biggest financial mistake that men make is having kids with the wrong children, having kids with the wrong woman, and having kids when you're not ready. Like I said, just like how you have to have something to teach the woman when you get into a relationship, you have to have something to teach the kid when you have kids. And oftentimes, I see many young men in this age range, 23 to 33, they start having kids far too young, far too early, and they have nothing to teach the kid. And if you have nothing to teach the kid in terms of precepts and concepts and how to move about in society, that kid will be raised without any knowledge of understanding of that. And then when that kid grows up to have their own children, they have nothing to teach their kids either. And so it becomes a cyclical effect within the community. And that's why I say, we have all these quote-unquote programs and agendas for the so-called black community that, in my opinion, are disingenuous, because they're ran by global elites and backed by the Federal Reserve, so it can't be trusted. The root of the issue always comes back to the family. Is there a strong dynamic? Is there male authority, male figurehead in the household? And if there isn't, then that's what's going to lead to a destruction of the community. And I'm just going to leave it there because we can, go on for hours about it. But as a man, we have to understand that within our household, we have to be the beacon of leadership and wisdom and knowledge, but also the peace as well. We're the rock and the foundation for our family. So are we ready to have that responsibility? Are we ready to be that at this age, at this stage of our life? Most men aren't. A lot of men aren't. And you shouldn't want to seek that yet, because you haven't learned everything yet at this age. You can't rush this process. You can't rush relationships. So wait until you're ready. But until then, seek the Most High. Seek your purpose. Find your passion. And dive into it. And if you're unsure about what your purpose is, find ways to serve others. That's going to give you a better roadmap for what your purpose is at this stage of your life. And your purpose will change. It always changes over time. It's never stagnant. Then you can start to add other spaces to your life for relationships. But until then, don't rush that. Don't rush to fill what you think is an empty void. It's just going to cause confusion, especially if it's not the right partner. But that's pretty much it on this topic, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Leave your thoughts as we always do in the comment section. And until then, guys, continue to stay safe, be vigilant, make smart decisions, and peace.